Hello and thank you for watching the Angry Rooster Creations channel. Today we are taking a look at another fountain pen in this video. This here is the Jinhao 911 fountain pen. It is a almost entirely stainless steel pen with a plastic hooded nib section. The rest of the pen is almost entirely stainless steel. This is a rather economical pen. When I bought this one, I believe at the time, it could have been on sale, but I believe at the time on AliExpress, I got this pen for $1.80. So this is one of the more budget-friendly pens that I own. It's available in this brushed stainless finish. And it's also available, I believe, in 3 different black finished versions, which are pretty much all the same, except that the color of the clip and the finial caps changes. There's a black one that has chrome clip-in caps, gold clip-in caps, and then there's another one that has a black clip-in caps. This pen, it has a slip cap. I know it had sort of a pop sound there, but this does not actually have any kind of a snap to it. Inside of the cap, you have 4 spring fingers, essentially, that put tension on the hood there to tension the cap on. And when you press the cap all the way till it seats, it does have a cap liner down inside. If I can get a light on this real quick so that hopefully you can see down in there. You might be able to see down in there. But there's a cap liner in there, a plastic one-piece cap liner that actually does seat onto the section. So I was trying to get this a little closer. You can see that is a plastic cap liner. There are no fasteners, screws, or anything inside of the cap, which is nice compared to some of the other pens that I've had. And I don't know if it's going to show, but there is actually a witness line on this feed, or on this hood, excuse me, around there. It might not show too well on camera, but there is a witness mark where you can tell that that cap liner does actually seat against the hood and seal. So now I've had this pen for almost 2 weeks, I guess, and I inked it up pretty much as soon as I got it. And I've used it intermittently, but there's been a few times in there where it's set for a few days. And so far, I haven't had any kind of skipping or drying or anything that's occurred. This pen seems to seal pretty well. Now also on the cap, I'd like to note that this particular pen has a sprung clip. So as you can see, there is actually an internal spring in there with a hinged clip, instead of just being a simple stamped clip, which is quite nice. I did not expect that when I got this pen. I just assumed it was going to have a pressed on, a pressed stamped clip that would be under its own tension, but I was kind of surprised when I got this that it actually has a sprung clip. Now, the cap does post. Now you can kind of hear, I don't know how well this is going to come through on the camera's mic. That is metal on metal. So those fingers, the springs in there, are stainless steel. And they're contacting that stainless steel barrel, so you'll hear that. Now that's the main reason. Well, I didn't know exactly the construction of this cap when I ordered this pen. But that's kind of one of the reasons that I ordered this with the brushed stainless finish versus the painted finish. Because I figured that this being metal cap, metal pen, and kind of figuring with other slip cap sort of Parker 51 style or Parker 51 adjacent styling of pens like this, that you have that sort of tension finger cap. If you were to get the black version of this pen, there's a very good chance that over time posting that cap, those springs will scratch that black finish. So I'm going to try to see if I can get any of these on camera. I don't think they'll actually show with the lighting and everything. But there's a couple spots on the barrel. From looking at the viewfinder here, I don't see that it's showing through. And they're barely noticeable, so like I said, they probably won't show through on the camera. But in person, there's a couple spots where I can see some just very light scratching on the stainless. But since it's a scratch on the stainless finish, it's hard to even see. But if this were the black painted finished version, there's a chance that would scratch through the finish and the stainless underneath would show. So if you would like to get one of these in the black finish, just be aware that your cap is likely going to scratch the barrel when you post the cap. Now, as far as the pen itself, aside from the cap, like I said, you have a plastic hooded section here. Now, like most of the hooded nib pens I've seen, and one of the other, I have another Jinhao hooded pen model, a hooded nib pen. This hood is seems to be glued to the section, which is a bit unfortunate. There's ways that you can release that glue, but most of the Chinese hooded nib pens, and I think even a lot of the original Parker pens, kind of are in that situation where the hoods were glued to the sections. They were not really made to be removable, which kind of complicates cleaning of the pen. Myself personally, with these pens like this, especially with it being as cheap as it is, I generally buy one of these or a pen like this with the intention that I'm going to always ink it with the same ink. That way I don't have to worry about 100% flushing all of the residual ink out of the pen, you know, when I periodically clean the pen, and have to worry about ink colors mixing, because without being able to remove this hood, there's a good chance you'll have either some residual ink or some residual water inside of the feed. So, you know, that's something to be aware of, but that's kind of a commonality between all of the various hooded nib Chinese pens that are out there, with the one exception being this Wing Sung 601 pen here, which is a pen at a much different price point. Generally speaking, it's almost 9 to 10 times the price of one of these little cheap Jinhaos, but this is the one Chinese hooded nib pen that I know of where the hood is actually removable. It's not, the threads aren't glued, and you can readily remove that to clean the pen. And I will state this, with this one, it also has a similar spring tension slipped style cap. I mean, this being essentially, this Wing Sung essentially being a copy of a Parker 51. But I will say, between the two, it is a smoother capping experience on this Jinhao. Because frankly, the fingers, those spring tension fingers inside of this pen, actually do feel better than the more expensive Wing Sung. Now, back to the actual pen body itself. I will make a note here that when you go from the transition from the stainless barrel here to the hooded section, there is, on this particular version that I have, it's probably not going to show up yet. It's barely there. It's barely perceptible. But on mine, at the top of the hood, so this is on the top of the, you know, when you're at the top, as you would hold the pen when writing it, there's a bit of a step here where the stainless part of the barrel is proud of the hood section. On the bottom, it's pretty much flush, and on the sides, it's slightly proud, but not that much. I mean, once again, this is a $1.80 pen. That's, you know, that's not really, for the price that this pen is, it's definitely not a deal breaker. It's not really an issue, in my opinion, when in terms of writing and things. Like, you can feel it, you can hang your fingernail on it, but it's not uncomfortable. The only thing I found, though, is that sometimes when I cap the pen, I have to pay attention, because if I cap this pen with the clip up, I don't know why it's like this, but with the clip up, and I go to cap this pen, it'll hit the barrel there, and the cap won't seat fully unless I push up and then continue, you know, and continue to push backwards, because it will hang on that little bit of a step there. Now, for whatever reason, if I turn the cap, say upside down, where the clip is towards the bottom of the, underneath the feed and nib, it goes on just fine. I don't know exactly why it's like that. And like I said, this is one example of this pen. It might just be that's an issue with my particular pen. It's not it's not awful. It doesn't ruin the use of the pen or anything. But with my particular pen, I do have to be mindful of that cap when I go to cap the pen to make sure that the cap's actually seated. Like I said, once again, it is a $1.80 pen, so I'll give it a pass on that. It doesn't ruin the functionality. Now, on the pen itself, if I take the barrel off, you have the standard Jinhao 3.4 millimeter Chinese piston type converter here. This pen will take the standard 3.4 millimeter Chinese cartridges. Now, I will note the actual section here is metal. This section piece here is actually metal. Now, on the barrel side of things, the threads inside the barrel are a plastic insert into that stainless steel barrel. So as far as that misalignment, I would say it's probably because maybe that plastic piece, the wall thickness on that plastic threaded piece is maybe offset one side to the other, and that's why you get that slight bit of misalignment in the barrel. Now, from what I can see, it looks like that plastic piece, if you can see there's little notches around the outside of it, seems to have almost like splines. So I don't know if that's there because this has an adhesive applied to it, and that's to give a spot for the adhesive to sit between the metal, the stainless, and the plastic, or if those fins are actually slightly larger in diameter and it's giving them a place to squish down, so this has a mechanical press fit. I'd say it's probably a mixture of both. So on that, I don't necessarily think that this is a structural issue with the pen in and of itself under normal use. Now, you do have plastic threads here, metal threads here. So, you want to be mindful of that. So I would recommend that when you reassemble this pen, make sure you don't over torque it, which you shouldn't anyways with any pen, regardless if it's plastic on plastic, metal on metal, what have you, injection molded, acrylic, celluloid. Anytime you're assembling your pens, you don't need to grab them and go gorilla mitts and just like really crank down on them. If you do that with this pen, there's a chance that if that is an adhesive, you could cause that adhesive to fail and you could cause the barrel to spin on that and potentially, mess up the pen, or you could cause those plastic threads to strip on the metal here. But like I said, that's not something specific to this pen. That's like all pens. You don't really want to crank on them when you assemble them. So just make sure when you put this on that you're doing it finger tight. I wouldn't even suggest using a wrist rotation. Just use the rotation of your fingers to tighten that on. Tight is tight. You don't have to kill it. This is not sealing anything. I mean, this is a metal-bodied pen. You wouldn't eyedropper this pen. So just be mindful of that when you're putting the pen together. Don't just grab it and crank on it. I don't think that is a structural issue that you would have to worry about. So overall, as far as the external construction and the actual functionality of the pen itself, as far as externals, clips, carry, and all that stuff, I think this is it's a pretty well-made pen. Like I said, there's that one little thing about the step down between the barrel and the hood. But for $1.80, I mean, that's not something that I would consider to be a real detractor. Now I'm going to do just a pretty quick little writing sample. This pen here is inked with Noodler's Polar Krill. So, and this is just 20-pound copy paper here. And this pen is an extra fine. If I remember correctly, I believe you can get this one in a fine. I know you can get these nibs separate, but I believe it's offered in both in fine and extra fine, depending on the listing. Some listings only have it listed with a fine, extra fine nib, and some have it listed with both. And it writes pretty good so far. I haven't had any issues. As long as I keep the nib on the paper, with it skipping or anything. Now you will hear there is a lot of noise. It has feedback. I would not call this scratchy. Like, it's not really dragging on the paper to the point that it's unpleasant to write with. But it does have some feedback. You can hear it. You can feel it a little bit. But all in all, I think the nib is just fine. Now, as far as the size and weight of the line, this is a bit of an absorbent paper, and this is a slightly more aggressive ink. It's not as aggressive as some of the Polar inks. This is a Lamy Safari here with an extra fine nib. And line weight is about on par with an extra fine Lamy Safari. So it's more of a European extra fine. This does reverse write. So there's your reverse writing. And then compare that. So there is a bit of a line weight difference. Not huge, but there is a line weight difference between reverse writing and standard writing. So, I mean, functionally, I think this pen seems to work just fine. Like I said, I've written with it a bit, not the most. I mostly do art and drawing, and I have used this a little bit to do some sketching and doodling with it. And it works fine in my experience with this particular pen. So I can't speak for all of them. I think sometimes I've heard that some of these hooded nib pens, and I think this is just kind of in general with Jinhaos, they're kind of, with the nibs, sometimes can be a little hit and miss. Most of the ones I've had have been good. I have had some in different pens that were, you know, maybe the tines were misaligned or something and they were kind of scratchy, but that can also happen with most brands. You can get a pen that has a misaligned tines on the nib. But with my particular version of this pen, it seems to write just fine. Now, as far as like potential usage of this pen, I think it's a good pen. If you want something that doesn't, you know, it's all stainless, so it maybe looks a little bit more, you know, not as it's cheap. It doesn't necessarily look like a $2 pen, and it functions just fine. So if you wanted a pen that maybe looks a little bit more upscale that you can carry around, but that you're also not so concerned that if you lose it, you're not losing something that costs a lot to replace, I think that this is a good pen to fit that bill. You know, if you take something like one of these little Jinhao 992 demonstrator pens here, which is actually slightly more than this, even though you get these in a 6-pack, by the time you split it out, it's a little over $2 for one of these. You know, it's a demonstrator, and demonstrators are cool. But if you're trying to make an appearance with a pen, most people would look at something like this, you know, and they would view this probably looking at like a more valuable writing instrument. So if you know, work in some kind of professional capacity, but you also happen to be working in a place or an area, or maybe, you know, working on a job site where you could potentially lose or have a pen get destroyed, but you don't want to carry, you know, like a disposable pen or something that's cheap. You want to actually carry something that looks decent, but you don't have to worry about too much. I think this is a good pen to fit that bill. Like I said, due to the fact that the hoods are glued on these, and that's with most hooded nib pens, myself personally, if I have a hooded nib like that, that hood's glued, I dedicate that pen to a particular ink. That way, even when I go to clean and flush the pen, if there's some residual ink flow, since it's always going to be getting the same ink, I don't have to worry about any ink mixing or any incompatibilities or anything funky happening in the pen, or potentially affecting the color and sheen and things of that particular ink. So, with all that being said, I personally, with my experience with this one, I only have one as a sample size, I think it's a pretty good little pen. I personally think this one looks good. I think the black ones look good too. But like I said, with the way that the cap is designed, I think if you have one of these in black, you will eventually have that black finish wear off as if you post the cap. If you're somebody that never posts a cap, that might not be an issue for you. But if you're somebody that likes to post a cap, which this does post really securely, I think you'll end up damaging the finish on the black pens. And I guess I should have mentioned this earlier. As far as posting, it doesn't alter the weight of the pen. This it is a stainless pen, but it's pretty thin, press form stainless. So this pen is not heavy at all. It might be slightly heavier than this Lamy Safari, but not extremely. Posting the cap does not significantly backweight the pen or alter the way it balances in your hand. I mean, the point of balance on the pen is mostly towards the front end anyways, about where the cap, with it posted, it might just be right about where the cap hits the body. And for me, that's technically inside the web of my hand. So it's not backweighted. It doesn't feel funny to write with it unposted. For me, it's not too short to write with unposted. And as far as that unposted length, it's just slightly shorter than a Lamy Safari when unposted, which should be right around 5 inches. Hold on, let me double check that for you real quick. Yeah, it's pretty much almost right on 5 inches from end finial to the end of the tip of the nib. It's like right at 5 inches. So I would say most people, unless you have like extraordinarily large hands, I would say most people could write perfectly fine with this pen unposted. Now, one more thing before I end this video. I did pull out that Wing Sung 601 a minute ago. So for those that don't know, the Wing Sung 601 is almost a one-for-one copy of a Parker 51. Now this one is the one that has the more modern press filler. The more modern press filler, where instead of actually having the rubber diaphragm in here, it has a sort of double O-ring piston head, but it is a press button vacuumatic style fill. And even to the point that a lot of people say that these are actually made with old Parker tooling. But the reason I bring this up is to say that with this, and this kind of goes with like the Hero pens. I don't have a Hero 616 or 329. This Jinhao 911 is slightly smaller in diameter. I don't know how well that'll show up, but it is slightly smaller in diameter, to the point that if I take the cap from this Wing Sung and put it on here, it's kind of loosey-goosey, if you can see. So I know some people might have an issue with having a thin-bodied pen. So it's a bit thin for a lot of different fountain pens, but it's still, it's not as thin as a wooden pencil. It's not as thin as a disposable ballpoint pen, like a cheap Bic pen or anything like that. It is still more substantial, but it's a pretty thin-bodied pen. So if you're somebody that likes the really large-bodied pens, you like a more, this probably isn't going to be a kind of pen that you would be interested in. But if you're somebody who doesn't like big, chunky grip sections, you like something that's a little bit more sleek, a little bit more trim, a little slimmer, then this also might be a really good pen for you. So, having said all of that, I personally like this pen. I would recommend it, especially considering the price of it. I've had, I made a video on these Jinhao 619/777 pens that are roughly the same $2 price point. But between these two, the issues with the cap design on this and some other issues that actually functionally, this pen here functions more like a $2 pen. This is a $2 pen that functions and feels like a more substantially priced pen. Like I said, there are some nitpicky details about this pen. But for what you get for the price, I think it's a really nice pen. I think it looks good. And, I didn't do the most exhaustive writing test, but I have written on other pieces of paper and done some drawing with this pen over the last week, and it seems to function just fine. So, having said all of that, I hope that this is an informative video to some of you out there that watched it. If it informed you in any way and it helps you out, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up, a like down there. That'd really help me out. And if you've got any kind of questions about the pens, any kind of comment, anything to add, any suggestions or criticisms, critiques, drop it down there in the comment section. It's always good to get some feedback. Positive and negative, it all helps me out. And if you've watched this video, maybe you watched some of my others, you think I do a good job, you enjoy the content, or you're informed by the content, I'd really appreciate a subscription. That'd really help me out too. Thank you for watching, and I hope to catch you on the next one. Bye.